The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, is brought to you by Vocal Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Sunday afternoon in Des Moines. The time is 1 o'clock, and Wednesday evening, 9:30 p.m., all on Media Cable Channel 15. You can email us in Des Moines at vocaliowa@mchsi.com. My number is 515-276-3956, and John's number is area code 515-282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and welcome to the CPI report. That stands for Child Protection in Iowa, and that is our interest area. It's also our mission to influence public policy as it relates to child protection issues, protecting children. We believe that the child protection industry is essential in Iowa, that it's important that we protect children, but we have found it to be an industry or a mission gone wrong. A good idea, but one which has gone so sadly wrong in its execution that it causes serious problems in families. Because we get a bunch of bureaucrats who decide their own agenda, which is not necessarily directed to child protection, then we have things such as big money grabs from federal and state sources because of the way because of the way the bureaucrats are able to get connected with the feds and also with the General Assembly on this issue of child protection. And since it's all secret, we really don't know what's going on behind the scenes anyhow. So what you're going to be seeing on this program and others, you're going to see some critiques on how these issues are handled in Iowa. It's a sad situation to see millions of dollars spent. For an example, in the General Assembly, there is a bill called House File 619, which is 25 pages, and it's a knee-jerk reaction to the death of Jessetta Gage in Cedar Rapids. Isn't it interesting? I have an article around here somewhere that shows that child protection has child sexual abuse has dropped. Well, maybe I should hold that up. Child sexual abuse declines in Iowa. Well, if it's declining in Iowa, why is it that we're writing 25 pages of legal jargon to double penalties, to institute all kinds of DNA checking and things of this sort? Well, even the federal government is getting interested in tracking what they call predators. Everybody now becomes a predator, regardless of the nature of the sexual abuse for which they were charged. They now are predators because the whole idea is that they're likely to do it again. Well, Don has us a story with that we'll bring you in just a little bit, but before he does that, he has a message from Ottumwa, Iowa. Other people are interested in picking up this cause of protecting families from the bureaucracy. We have a rather fearsome thing going on here when citizens must be afraid of their government. And so we have other people who are joining. They don't have to be under our particular umbrella, or in our section, but they are interested in the same kinds of ideas. And the same is true with our courthouse consultant here, Terrance Walker. He's from a different organization, comes from a different viewpoint, different standpoint. He's watching over what happens in the courtrooms, and we'll get to him before very long. Before we do that, maybe we better get some kind of an idea of who, get his name and the name of his organization out here. One moment here. If you have a pencil and paper, that'd be a good idea to jot this information down. We'll be talking to Terrance Walker. There's his phone number, area code 515-288-3702. A matter of justice.
That should be a matter of justice, by the way.
Oh, a matter of justice, 2003 at yahoo.com. He's heads an organization called VIJO.org, and we have another website here, www.amatterofjustice.org. We probably should have an A stuck in there, Don.
So it's correct up here, isn't it?
Yeah.
A matter of justice, and then you need an A down here.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So while we're talking about that, we'll get back to Terrance in just a little bit on some courtroom discussion. What's happening in the judiciary? Are these poor guys actually being paid sufficiently for their efforts on our part? Their magnificent judicial wisdom. Are they actually being paid or compensated for their wisdom and their judicial judgment? Well, in the meantime, let's listen to what Don has to say from a lady in Ottumwa, Iowa, who has had a brush with DHS sufficient to enliven her and to get her to roll up her sleeves. What's she doing along that line, Don?
Well, her name is Linda Downs, and she is head of the group called Iowa Family Rights. And I didn't look it up on the internet, but I saw this information saying iowafamilyrights.org. So I would guess that if you type that in, she may have something on the internet, but I haven't searched that out. But anyway, for the parents out there, even the ones that are listening, hopefully in Nebraska, to this program, any place that there are parents out there that are concerned about what's happening, where the system is taking your children, some of you might be interested in coming to West Des Moines. Anybody that's not familiar with West Des Moines, well, it's just on the west side of Des Moines, a little town. And there's a park called Walnut Woods Park. And at this park, on June 11th, that's just going to be right around the corner from the time you watch this program, just in a few days. On Saturday, June 11th, there's going to be an annual family get-together. Saturday, June 11th, starting at 9:30, and they're going to continue on till 4 o'clock or around that time. They're going to have a meal at noon. So if you would like to attend, bring a dish of food to help in that, and bring a plate and silverware so you have something to eat on. There's going to be a lot of other food there. And if you want some more information on this, call me at 515-276-3956. They're planning on having Ed Fallon there to speak. I know he fights the cause for DHS and falsely accused. So it'll be interesting to hear him talk, and there's going to be another person from out of state coming. I don't remember her name right off. John used to be in Missouri. Uh, going to be coming and talking, and she's got a lot of legal knowledge and tremendous amount of information to share to parents that are falsely accused. So I encourage you to come out.
Is that Cheryl Barnes?
Cheryl Barnes.
Okay, good.
She used to have a website with a tremendous amount of information. I'm not sure, but it may still be on the internet. She's helped a tremendous amount of people. Of course, there's a lot of people needs help when we've got a system out of control like the DHS. Well, I'm going to jump down now to the email that she sent me and let it be self-explanatory about what she says from her county, Wapello County, southern Iowa. Don, she's addressing it to me. Seems like the Wapello County DHS is trying to confiscate every child under 5 in the county. Some parents just will not listen, no matter how hard you try to get them to understand. They just can't imagine these people who work for DHS are so underhanded and corrupt. I agree. And she says, not until it's too late. Yeah, I see a lot of them go clear to the termination of parenting rights, or maybe they'll contact us when they're in the Supreme Court. It's almost impossible to turn the situation around by that time. One of the reasons why there's a problem is because when the parents are accused, they believe they're innocent and they have no reason not to hold back on what they say. And lo and behold, every word you use against you, it will be used against you. Every word you say will be held against you. They'll twist it around to their way of looking at it. Your children are money to them. They have no concern about the welfare of your children. They'll say they do, but the outcome is totally different. Well, she goes on. They took a baby from a girl who tested positive for exposure to marijuana smoke. Then they gave her a UA at her home. Now that's something new to me. Usually they send you out to a government place to have UAs done. In this case, the claim was positive. She called me the next day. I had to go directly to, in this case she's saying SIEDA. That's, I can't tell you what that is down in her town. And have another one done. Well, it's government controlled, I'm sure. And it came out negative. At the removal hearing, DHS had one of their experts testify. After the tester from SIEDA, and he gave some crazy analysis that said the mother must have been exposed to marijuana smoke too. They could have done that anyway. I mean, you and I walk down the street, in the restrooms, who knows where we could get exposed to marijuana smoke. But DHS don't care. That's mixed business for them. There was 4 families in the courtroom willing to take the child. 4 family members. All would have qualified, but they put her in foster care, the child. So they needed to do a home study first. How many times have we heard that family members step up and say, we're here to take care of the children, even though there's a law that says DHS needs to consider the family members? No, we just love to put them in foster jails where we can control what is going on. She goes on. The judge was a sit-in judge. In other words, the regular judge, for some reason, wasn't in the courtroom at the time, so another judge had to take his place temporarily for that hearing. Oh, because the juvenile judge was sick. So they want to continue keeping the hearings going on. So they put a replacement judge in there temporarily. So he asked the DHS worker what she thought the juvenile judge would do. That's like asking the fox to guard the chicken house. The DHS worker said, "Oh, he would put the child in foster care." So guess what this good judge did? He did just like the DHS worker suggested that the other judge would do. Well, she was probably right, but that's kind of what's the word for it? One-sided. The judge is only looking for the social worker's input, and he cares less about what the parents have to say. Now the now the father's ex-wife has seen this as her opportunity to keep the father away from her kids, which she has been trying to do for 5 years, and told the DHS worker that he molested her daughter. Now, we know that can happen, but in a lot of cases, this situation happens over and over again. Women seize the power of saying the words that her ex has molested her daughter, and DHS just loves that. So it's a powerful tool. It may be wrong, but they use it, and the DHS rejoices in that tool. Oh, she goes on. She nearly lost her kids over it and has now moved to Oklahoma. Unfortunately, no matter what they have done, they are going to terminate both their rights. She concludes by saying, "I hate these people. Yesterday, the mother tried to commit suicide by slashing her wrists. It was a bad day." Why'd she want to slice her wrists? I don't think she was motivated to do that before DHS intervention. Before I turn it over to John, I want to remind people again about the annual family get-together for concerned parents out there. It's going to be June 11th here in West Des Moines at the Walnut Woods Park. That's Saturday, June 11th. Runs most of the day from 9:30 to 4 o'clock with a meal at noon. Bring your own dish of food and table service. You can call me for more information, 515-276-3956.
Why don't you repeat that number?
My number is 515-276-3956 for further information. John?
Okay, you'll take a digital camera with you, won't you, to the picnic and see if you can get a few words from Linda and from Cheryl?
I'm thinking about that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we get to turn to Terrance Walker, who may have a comment or two with respect to the budget for the judicial system. Terrance Walker.
Well, thanks a lot, John. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this show again, time and again. I think it's something that's very needed here in this day and age when we have such a branch of government that's so out of control and out of whack as the judiciary. And that's why my organization, VJOL, stands for Vote Iowa Judges Out, is right in keeping with that duty, public service to keep these officials in check. What we're doing, what we found out here, we were going to report on last week, due to some technical difficulties with the computer situation, we were able to actually come forward with the information. We were going to report on a proposed bill, which would basically increase the highest judges' budgets here in the state by about almost $16,000 a year each, which I think is a really high amount. You know, at the same time, we've got to be asking ourselves, well, why the hell are we giving such a high pay raise to these guys and a few ladies when at the same time we are closing schools you know, not only across the state and across Polk County, we've got, what is it? We're recommending like 4 or 5 schools, elementary schools, to be closed. This is misplaced priorities, I think. Well, this goes back to January 9th, where Judge Louis Liverado, I call him, of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, he made a public public stand or public he voiced his public opinion in the Register a couple times, and through the mouths of, or through the pens of a couple other Register editors, on the need, his perceived need for more funding for the courts. Started in January 9th, 2005 with the Register article, Des Moines Register article. And then also he piped the same line in the State of the Judiciary speech he gave on January 15th of this year as well. Now, he not only did he talk about the scaling back of what they've done the past 4 or 5 years, since the, you know, all the budget cuts and stuff over the past 4 or 5 years, but he also talked about how the judicial branch this year, for fiscal year 2006, he was talking about increasing the budget $7.6 million in new money. Not only was he talking about the vacancy of judgeships and the non-judicial employee, he was talking about how non-judicial employees were required to take 8 days of mandatory unpaid leave. And then he talked about how judges and court officers have severely reduced their travel budgets, and they've also eliminated some other discretionary but important services. Now, when he was asking for all this money, he did not say, well, we want big increases in our salary as well. Well, as of May 20th, 2005, the Register, Des Moines Register, reported that a late amendment to a catch-all bill before the Iowa legislature would give an annual raise of 13%. That's 13% to the Iowa Supreme Court versus 8% for county district judges. Now, most people usually only get a 3 or 4% yearly increase in their salary. That's to account for the inflation. So, you know, your standard of living doesn't decrease. Well, if we're in such a dire straits here with the budget in Iowa and across the nation, how is it that we can arrive at a 13% increase for a salary? And it talks about in this article how the bulk of the state's judges asked the Bar Association to support a continuation of the 5% pay difference between the levels of judges. But, again, Chief Judge Louis Liverado basically argued that there's no continuing legitimacy to the pay structure, and then he also talked about how the number of increasing administrative tasks, such as statewide budgets and disciplining lawyers, have added to their value. And they quote Judge Liverado as saying, "The justices of the Iowa Supreme Court think it is time that the judicial branch implement a pay structure grounded in reality and compensate its justices based on their comparable worth to other government employees without any artificial parameters." Well, if we're going to be grounded in reality, let's support our schools. Let's keep our schools open. Let's not give extra money to a judge that, in my opinion, is not doing their job. And there's a lot of them that aren't doing their job. And we've explored that many a week here on this show. Did you have some comments on this, Don?
Yeah, so I wanted to comment about the school. You said, talking about closing the 4 or 5 schools. Is it possible that when maybe they're using this as an excuse, and they close these schools, And then they can come back a few months later and say, oh, we got so many kids, we got to have a new school. What do you think of that, Terrance?
Well, I think they're going to complain when we have a number of dropouts that may emanate from all this, and then they're going to be resulting in more people involved in crime and involved in the courts, and then they'll just justify it as part of their next increase for their budget.
Exactly.
So, this is what we need to focus on is our priorities. Uh,
Priorities are money, 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 money,
Yeah,
money, money,
well,
money, money.
and when you're asking for 7.7 million, and then you get a proposed what it is 12 million, uh, it, it stands to reason with all the things that are going wrong in the court that, hey, why not put some of this money to use? Why are we why don't we put some of this money to use in sections of the law that we need to be, such as improving the disposition of some of these cases? We've talked to countless scores of individuals who go to district court or to the Iowa Court of Appeals or to the Iowa Supreme Court who get their issues ignored. They raise an issue and it's ignored, or it comes out to be decided. Something in the case seems to be decided on a ground that was not even presented to the court. I think you brought an excellent example of that in the case that you were talking about this fall, John, where the court basically ignored your issue. You had been raising the whole time that the complaint they filed against you did not comport with the Iowa Constitution. Yet and still that issue was sidestepped. Why aren't these judges doing their job right now? How do they deserve an increase if they can't get it right? So many cases, and this is just a fraction of the. We just touched on a few, and I know there's so many more people out there that have been so terribly disaffected by the lack of consistency and lack of work ethic that's in the courts to this day. And that's not to say that all judges are doing this. There's a lot of that are, but there's, again, when you come across as many cases as I have, and they're ignoring issues, they're twisting not only the meaning of the words, but they're also failing to address some of the issues brought to light in the cases. I can't say honestly that they're doing their jobs. One case in particular that we've been bringing to light was Isidro Ramirez. This was a case that was decided April 28th, I believe, of this year, 2005, which the chief judge of the Iowa Court of Appeals, and you can look this up on the website. This was on look up the Ramirez case, decided April 28th of 2005 by the Iowa Court of Appeals, in which the chief judge, Judge Rosemary Sackett, specifically said that the lower court didn't do their job. They basically allowed the prosecutor to draw up the order and signed off on it. Now, wherein do you justify a pay increase for that kind of judge is doing that? You're not even doing your own work. So how do you deserve a pay increase? If many of the people that's out there that's listening, if you go to work and you have somebody else doing all your work for you, do you think that you're entitled to a pay increase? I don't. Do you have a comment on that, John?
Take that ruling one step further that you said the judge actually signed his name to, but in reality he did no research. But that ruling was based upon the one of the attorneys turning in a
fabricated order.
Fabricated, and the judge, for whatever reason, too lazy or something, or maybe because he's paid by the state, and if it's a state attorney that turns that in, well, he's not going to rule against the state attorney, I guess. So he can he can sign his name to many things that aren't even factual or haven't even been proven in front of him. and he just signs his name anyway. Where is justice in that when the other party has no way to contradict it?
And another troubling aspect of the judge just signing off on the order was the fact that, as Judge Rosemary Sackett had alluded to, was that the order contained legal and factual inaccuracies. Now, if these guys are the gatekeepers of justice and they are not sorting out what is facts and what is law, then I don't think that they deserve any increase in pay. I think they need to go back to ethical school and get some training on how to adequately conduct a court session and adequately administer justice. That's where we need to put some of the resources of this $12 million windfall that they have recently came into this year, which was almost a full $4.3 million on top of what they were asking for. That's just my opinion. What did you have to say, Don?
You were making a comment about the judge. Maybe he ought to go back to school to learn how to properly do his job. Well, did you ever think about this, Terrance? That maybe that's where he learned to do his job?
Yeah, well, you know, according to one of the distinguished law professors, Anthony D'Amato, he has a website, anthonydamato.edu. He has a law article where he specifically, not only does he, but there's another judge, I believe Edith Jones of the Fifth Circuit. They explicitly blame a lot of the law school training for the state of the judiciary that we have right now. And, you know, it's sad to say that in this State of the Judiciary message that Judge Liverado gave on January 15th, he didn't talk about any of these issues. He's basically holding out justice for ransom, according to him. We're supposed to be giving them money so that they can administer justice, when in actuality, that shouldn't be the full impetus that's driving justice. Money should not be the sole consideration when it comes to justice. We should be having people in those positions that are that meet the requirements to administer justice. That does not appear to be the case in this day and age, in this Iowa judiciary that we have in front of us right now. When we only have one justice standing up in the Iowa Court of Appeals saying, hey, we can't let the judge just sign off on something the prosecutor drew up. That's what we shouldn't be in a position like this where there's only one lone judge standing up against it. You know, what's your thoughts on that, John or Don?
No, I'm speechless. Speechless at what the court system is doing.
You're talking about the DHS holding out children for ransom. I think that the Iowa judiciary has essentially, in their call for more money and trying to scare everybody to think that the justice system is going to spiral downward and we're going to fail to administer justice. I think in that big brouhaha that they stirred up in January about all this lack of money and lack of resources that they supposedly had, I think they're basically holding justice out for ransom, and it's a sad day that we should be the saddest state of affairs here in Iowa where we have that taking place. Well, according to this article that they just came out with yesterday, May 31st of 2005, they basically got the $12 million, which was up and beyond $4.3 million on top of what they were asking for. And according to the article, they're not only getting that, but they're hiring new magistrates, they're hiring new justices, and they're proposing new tax increases. They've got 6 different new magistrates here in Polk County. Now they're trying to figure out how to staff them. Well, why wouldn't you figure this out beforehand? Why wouldn't you just hire 5 magistrates and then staff those guys instead of hiring 6 and try to say, well, we don't know how to staff the, and these are people we trust to administer justice and be fair. Well, they're not fair to the taxpayer, in my opinion, when they're going to make all these new positions and then they're going to say, well, we got enough money for these guys, but we don't have enough for the staffers, people to help them out, you know. Well, I'm sorry, but you guys should have thought this stuff through. And we trust in you to administer justice. It's insanity. Some of the actual figures of what they were talking about here in the May 20th article that was in the Register, and again allude to that, the task force supposedly issued a report to the legislative leaders that recommended a 31% pay increase for Supreme Court justices over a 3-year period. And then it recommended a 20.5% increase for the state's district court judges. Now, the Senate inserted an amendment to a bill calling for higher raises into an end-of-session catch-all bill that often escapes close scrutiny. And it's sad to say that we've got people that's in our legislature that does these kind of things, trying to slide stuff by you, and they discuss these kind of things behind closed doors, so the public doesn't get to hear what's really going on. Now, what Lavarado did not mention in his State of the Judiciary address in January, when he appealed for the $7.7 million to add support staff and keep courthouses open, was that they wanted all these pay raises. And guess what? The Supreme Court justices, let's see, they were paid $122,000, $122,500 in 2005. According to these proposals, it increased it to $138,500 in 2006. The Court of Appeals justices paid $117,850 in 2005, and it would increase to $129,600 in 2006. District court judges paid $112,000 in 2005, would increase to $121,000 in 2006. So this is where your tax dollars are going. I thought you'd like to know. If you have any comments, or if you would like to raise your voice and protest, maybe you can give me a call. We can have you on the show, or we can discuss these issues, because I think that it's time that we do something about this, because it's a waste of our money, and you know, we're not doing anything. I think that can be quantitatively quantified as increasing the level of justice here in Iowa, just by adding to these judges' coffers, and if that's what you want to call it. But did you have a comment, John, or Don?
Yeah, here's one of the appointees for a magistrate's position.
Is that his name?
He wants
Mackenzie?
he's asking for only 90,000, but the 90,000 is bananas. He doesn't want that in dollars, because.
Well, what about his staff?
He
forgot to budget for his staff.
He should have asked for high-class staff. Sure, you bet. He's
That's very appropriate.
He's a real swinger.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are real swingers.
You bet.
Tell you.
Well, I want to thank you for that discussion. We'll be back with you here in case you have any other cases here. We'll be back with you in just a moment. I say moment, but sometimes those moments get stretched. One of the things that I really appreciate sitting in court is when there is one of these judges, rare indeed, who is very responsible, who is quiet, soft-spoken. When it comes time for him to make a ruling, he'll tell you precisely why he is making the ruling in the way that he is doing it, and he is very just almost like a teacher tells you step by step what is going on. Now, that kind of a judge I appreciate. I sat in the hearing of a federal judge by the name of Judge Longstaff, and somebody was getting a little off the beaten path and raising an issue that was not germane to the current issues. And he says, I have a habit. He says, it may not be a habit that you'll agree with, but I have a habit of addressing only those issues that are appropriately before me. So I thought that was a kind way of saying you're out of bounds. He simply said that what his habit was. Well, I thought that was a rather interesting approach to this whole thing. Well, so it goes with these courts. Well, there's one thing that I need to point out to you. A gentleman by the name of Larry Smith is a rather interesting, a rather prominent businessman in Fairfield, Iowa. He is a divorced man, and sometimes through the business of divorce comes some pretty untidy things. And in his case, the children decided that they would live with father. That was their choice. Well, one of the children soon rebelled as she was approaching adulthood and charged her father with incest. And the motivation is not truly clear as to why that was done, but it's sad that that has to come about. Well, he went to trial. He had expert witnesses. He had a good attorney. And the decision, as it was in the Centerville case, was a hung jury. Well, they decided that wasn't good enough. So they tried him again. Again, the decision was a hung jury. And when you get into these sexual abuse cases, you'll find that there are some rather disturbing things that happen. And the disturbing things that happen is that some of our jurors have a tough time of separating fact from fiction, have a tough time separating what is real and what is not real. And if you say sexual abuse, they're likely to jump to the conclusion that the person is guilty until he proves himself innocent. And they are willing to throw overboard many of the protections that we have. Well, it's a sad situation when that occurs. But in this second trial, there was a hung jury. Well, of course, this is costing money to the businessman, and but he's pleased that he was able to show that there was no forensic evidence in support of the allegation of sexual abuse. We have a doctor at Cedar Rapids at a protection center, a child protection center, that is funded by the Iowa General Assembly. And that doctor was caught in one big lie. Well, she's going to keep on lying no matter what in this particular case.
One lie leads to another lie.
That's
doesn't it?
right, and so we have a parade of lies throughout the entire situation. Well, I think it's sad when that occurs, but he apparently Lawrence Smith, has a good attorney, and was able to trap her in those lies. Still in all, it seems strange that any juror would believe anything that was said in court once you catch the expert witness fabricating evidence. So he's rather confident that in the end he will prevail. The sad story is that the prosecutor decided that 2 times was not sufficient in this case, and that it would be necessary to try Larry Smith again. So on July the 11th, in a town near Grinnell, he will be tried the 3rd time on bogus charges of child sexual abuse. It's a popular accusation. It costs the accuser nothing in terms of money or anything else to make the accusation. The hurt can go far deeper than the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. The hurt can be, in human terms, can be enormous. So we'll be watching what happens here on July the 11th to see if they are actually going to go through with the allegations of child sexual abuse, and in the Fairfield area. He was able to get it moved from Fairfield to another county, but of course this case is heard, the sounds for this case are heard all over Iowa. And this is another case, Terrance, in which we have an example of what we would regard as prosecutorial misconduct. When the prosecutor decided that he would charge again, who did he call? Not the clerk of court. He called the news agency so that the news would get out. Well, it isn't his responsibility to do things of that sort, but some of these people don't usually attend to what is their duty and what is not their duty. Well, we promised that we would tell you a little bit about a measure of grabbing money from the feds. If we can do a poor job in Iowa with what we're doing, we can do a much poorer job if we can only get another $1 million. Will you tell us, Don, about the $1 million grab for money by our friend Mr. Leonard Boswell, as he offers all kinds of money if only we do what government tells us to do. Don?
You talked about money, but nothing is said about all the emotional damage that can go along with this in the name of justice. But I realize there's also 2 sides to the story, too. Leonard Boswell, U.S. Representative, flanked by state and local law enforcement officers Tuesday, announced a proposal to funnel $300 million into states' efforts to better track sex offenders. Boswell, a Democrat in Iowa, has introduced legislation in Congress that he says will help create and maintain better sex offender registries. In those last number of weeks, we've been shocked and we've been horrified by reports of horrendous acts being committed against our children, Boswell said in Des Moines. I wonder if it bothers him when we report the shocking news that DHS is lying and abusing the children they are paid to help take care of. Well, anyway, that's my point of view. Whether it's in Florida or sadly right here in Iowa, across the country, it has caused us to become very united to keep these violent predators off the streets and away from our children. Well, they're going about it in the wrong way. In some ways, they're making more problems for themselves when they do this. Boswell said his proposed legislation would provide money to states using a population-based formula. If approved, Iowa would receive about $1 million. Well, why did the federal government get it in the first place? And in order to hand out $1 million, they probably blew $5,000 in paperwork, in parties, you name it, so the $1 million can come back. Why can't the states handle their own problem? State officials said such a grant would help improve assessment of sex offenders and their tracking. Proposing the legislation, which was introduced last week, Boswell said it would make it easier for states such as Iowa to beef up efforts to prevent child sexual abuse. Public safety funding is scarce, Boswell said in a statement. States should not be forced to risk the safety concerns of our children because of a lack of funding. They talk about children here, but they care less about the family, and the child is part of the family. Toughening laws against sex offenders has become a national issue after a string of high-profile murders in which children are allegedly taken by known sex offenders. In Iowa, Jessica Gage, 10, of Cedar Rapids, was found slain in March, and a registered sex offender was charged. Iowa state legislators reacted with legislation that gives longer prison times for offenders and requires molesters who are out of prison or parole and probation to be electronically tracked. But they're making legislation here, but what they did not help save this girl's life. Boswell has co-sponsored other legislation that would increase penalties for sexual offenses, create a national database of offenders, and improve methods to keep track of them. Public Safety Commissioner Kevin Tech said the proposed federal legislation would take state legislators' efforts even further by helping states work together to track offenders. It will tie up many of the ends that stop at the state line and allow for better cooperation in tracking offenders across state lines, he said. In Des Moines, officials said they hope the work results in more money. Des Moines Police Chief Bill McCarthy said, "We think the enforcement of this crime at the local level works best because we know these people. We know where they live. We would like to be in the position to have the resources to do the follow-up to make sure they are where they say they're going to be." And I want to finalize, John, with the comment about the annual family get-together that I've mentioned twice in the program before. It's going to be held in West Des Moines at the Walnut Woods Park. Who's interested? Any and all parents that have lost their children, grandparents should be interested in what DHS is doing, destroying the family. So anybody that's interested, come out Saturday, June 11th. During the day from 9:30 to 4 o'clock, there's a meal. Bring a dish of food and some table service so you can eat. Call for more information. My number is 515-276-3956. And I'll turn it over to John.
There's the number. How's that?
Yeah, you can read my number there.
You bet. Okay. There's a couple of things that we need to talk about. You mentioned some state legislation, and even this federal legislation and the state legislation are all knee-jerk reactions, and they involve enormous amounts of money for programs which probably will fail, but they will provide lots of money for agencies that are looking for money to spend. It's a sad situation when the whole thing is money, money, money driven. Has very little to do with child protection. Our system was so corrupt that several years ago they said that they were thinking about actually shutting down the Megan Registry. Now we're making it national, so we can make it a real mess on a nationwide basis. And it probably will harm a lot of people who are improperly placed on the Megan Registry on a national basis. Don, what should happen in cases that a person gets a child abuse report? We only have a minute or two here, but can you give us a real quick rundown on what should happen?
By the time you get your report, there's a lot of water went under the bridge. You should have been doing something prior to that. But at this point in time, we suggest that you make a request for expungement of the report. And that'll take you into an administrative hearing. And if you lose there, you can file for a judicial review in the district court. And if somebody loses there, they can file in the Iowa Supreme Court. And John, do you want to see who the contact person is there?
Let's see if we can.
If you want to make an appeal to the DHS when you get a abuse report that you disagree with, or you know it's going to be harmful to you, you need to be asking for expungement to Rhoda Harris at Hoover Building. There's your phone number, 281-8774. But you probably just need to go into the internet, as you see at the bottom there, and type in either one of those two. The bottom one's shorter. snipURL.com/9FAR. That takes you to the DHS website and directly to an appeal form. You fill out a simple form, and it hit the enter button, and it goes right back to Rhoda Harris, who will set up a hearing date in front of the administrative law judge. John?
But in any case, resist those reports. You don't need a child abuse report against you.
Very, very important.
You bet. Well, we want to thank